Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of For the Love of Health, where I get the amazing chance to connect with other health practitioners, business owners, service-based providers, or healers and coaches too, right? There's a lot of us who are connecting directly with their clients, serving their clients, and finding ways to make their practice work, make their practice their own. And we have so much amazing contributions happening in this community. So just so many great ways to listen in and pick up some tools for our own practices by listening to others. I'm here with Amanda Love today. And Amanda is a registered holistic nutritionist based now in Austin, Texas. But we were just talking about how she just recently moved from Arizona to Austin, Texas, and is now also kind of finding new ways to work new things into her business, into her practice. She has run a podcast focusing on fibromyalgia, as well as sleep concerns, sleep problems, sleep disturbances. And I'm excited. Welcome, Amanda. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I want to go back to what we were saying before we started recording today, which was a little bit about like what it was like to be able to help someone. Like, how did you start your podcast? Now that you're 3 years into doing a podcast, some of the things that you're dealing with now are a little bit different than when you started. So, what was that conversation like, and what kinds of things came up for you?
Yeah, it was interesting because I started the podcast and it was 3 years ago, but I actually didn't even know where to start. I first thought, oh, I'm just gonna get on podcasts, and I didn't even know how to do that. Now it's really easy to get on podcasts. There's Facebook groups. There's so many different ways you could get on podcasts, but I didn't really think about it like that way. I didn't even think about Facebook groups. I think I was just reaching out to ones that I found on like iTunes and stuff, but just wasn't working. And so I just was like, well, I'm going to start my own podcast. This was in February. It was actually 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. That's crazy. And I was like, there's not a fibromyalgia podcast. So I was like, okay. Um, I was in like a mastermind and I was in Arizona and it was in Palm Springs, and they were like, okay, what's like your big goal? Are you gonna do? And I'm like, I'm gonna launch my podcast. And I pretty much launched it within like a month. And that was that was my big thing. When I commit to something, I commit to it. But I didn't actually have anybody like showing me how to do it. So I was like, well, how do you even start a podcast? How do you even do the tech stuff and stuff? And I actually just like Google searched it, found my hosting site. My hosting site actually has like a little membership where you could just sign up and it'll tell you like tips and like what you use to like start a podcast. And you don't have to continue on that little membership. I canceled it like after a month, but that's how I started my podcast.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, podcasts, I mean, I'm not a traditional podcast. I do Zoom. I guess it falls under more like Facebook Lives, although it's not live, it's pre-recorded and it
Yeah.
plays out in my Facebook group. And I'm just trying to get it to be like more about valuable content that like sits in spaces that people can access at any point. So I'm trying to make it like evergreen content that can play out in different ways at different times of the year. Does that make sense? Like kind of like
Yeah.
just building more content and bringing on spaces so that people can then the content is a win-win for everybody who's involved, right? Like it's content that's for me and my viewers, but it's also content for my viewers featuring new people that they can then learn from and network with. And I mean, it's definitely a labor of love. Do you agree with that? Like it was a lot of work, a lot of love.
Yeah, it's funny because and I also launched it the same day as like Fibromyalgia Awareness Day, so it was in May. So I was like, that's a cool way to launch it and stuff. But honestly, I feel like it is really a labor of love, especially like 3 years into it and 115 episodes now and stuff like that. It's crazy. And it's a lot of back end work. I tell people you don't realize how much you do to even just like find the guests and see if they're the right fit, because you don't want everybody on your podcast and stuff. You have specifics that you want, and you probably the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a little more open at this point, but there are some definite prerequisites for like who could be compatible with this. I'm not talking to non-business owners, for example.
Yeah,
Everybody is.
I've had some. It's funny because I'm like, I've gotten into, now that I'm at 100 episodes, I'm like, I'm a little more picky, I feel like, but I still am like, well, if you're gonna send me a email and you're gonna pitch something and you haven't even like, sounds way out there, then that's a big no to me. Because I've had some crazy pitches where I'm just like, what? What's going on? Like, and I think it's special when people tell you, oh, they've listened to it beforehand and stuff. So then you're like, oh, at least they have a general idea, and they give you like topics that they want to talk about too. So they make it more like geared to whatever your podcast is instead of generic.
So what is the name of your podcast?
So my podcast changed. So I haven't officially announced the new title, but I changed it about like a month ago. And it's covering all aspects of holistic health with Amanda Love, because I was like, it's gone beyond fibromyalgia. Uh, Early last year, I was like, I'm gonna do more guest experts. Like late 2020, I was just doing one, and then it sort of just took off, and late last like February, March. And so I've just had so many guests, and they talk about like trauma, they talk about mindset, they talk about all these like different topics that I'm not an expert at, but I think people need to hear. And then I like to sprinkle in like inspiring stories too, because who doesn't like to hear, oh, this person has a story that inspires? Like I had one girl who was diagnosed with MS at the age of 15, and now she's like 30 years old and she's like thriving and stuff. So I like to sprinkle in those stories too.
So kind of otherwise like out there, just awesome stories. And what do you think it's about you that they find attractive to apply?
I think it for me is it's being authentic and stuff. I think that's the big thing. A lot of I think I tracked like my guests who I tracked. They're very authentic and they're real and they're honest and they share their struggles and stuff like that. I always ask people at the beginning of my episodes because I feel like this is super important. And I love to hear people's story, even if it's for a few minutes. Just what's your backstory? Why did you get into the health space and stuff? Because I find a lot of people who are entrepreneurs who are in the health space, every single one of them has a story of why they're in that health condition. And and usually it's their story. It's not a family member, it's their story. And I would say about 99.9% of my guests have done that.
So if you were just like to give like a tip to someone today who might be wanting to start a podcast, what kind of tip would you give them?
A tip, I would say, um, figure out, set a day, set a day that you're going to publish that first episode and then just do it. And then also a second tip I would say is look up, find out where like the information you need to how to start a podcast. It's actually really easy. And I think that's a big thing too. It's quite easy and it's easy to find guests. And I'm always happy to help people with that.
We might sound a little bit contradictory because we're both shaking our heads yes, but just earlier in the conversation we said it, some things are hard. So I mean, I think it is good to be, it's like, yes, some things are easy and then some things are hard when it comes to anything, right? So,
It
or
is.
based on the person, like what's challenging for one person is more challenging for another. So, but
It's more challenging to keep going, I think.
mm,
The very beginning, you're excited and stuff. Don't worry about like the listens and stuff. I feel like people are like, I'll see in these podcast groups, people will be like, well, how do you get my listens up and stuff? Well, your listenership will grow if people know that you publish on a certain day and stuff like that. And
I
I think
think,
it's,
yeah, sorry. I was just like, you just fed me. I was just thinking about, because it's not a blog, right? So there's no SEO involved. It's just this like space of, and that's one of the challenges of it, I think, is like you can't necessarily create tag words that can go evergreen on the internet. It's like just people have to actually get to the site where it lives.
yeah. And I think the big thing is consistency and stuff. If you publish it on a Sunday, then publish it on a Sunday. Like, I feel like I probably, if I had go back to anything, I would be publishing more often, and I wasn't doing it weekly and stuff, but that's okay. You learn from that and stuff. I've been weekly for probably like a year and a half now. So, I mean, but don't like, if it's not weekly, then at least twice a month and stuff. But remember, just because you're doing guests, make sure to sprinkle in your stuff too, because you want to make sure people know about you, because they might find you on the 50th episode. And if you don't do an episode, a solo episode for like 20 episodes, that's not good too. And I'm learning from that because I did.
Great pieces of advice Amanda loves today on how to start your podcast. If you haven't done it and you feel like, you know what, I like what they're doing, I can do that. You can do that. So tell me a little bit about this mastermind that you attended in Palm Springs. What kind of a mastermind was it? What was the duration of it? And why did you choose a mastermind?
Oh, so it was interesting. So, I haven't even talked about this in so long. I chose a mastering because I came out of my schooling and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, okay. And so this mastermind, if I'm remembering correctly, this was like 4 years ago, maybe. I don't remember. But it just, I could talk about it was a Canada based one, but I was in Arizona at the time. And they, I thought, oh, this will be great. There will be accountability calls twice a month and all of this. But like, I wasn't, and then there was like two like get togethers, one in Canada, one in Palm Springs. And I just didn't like, it helped me realize that you can't like just be on the internet. You can't just be doing that. But like, I wasn't getting anything out of it, I realized at some point. And I think that's the big thing with masterminds. It's hard to find a good mastermind. If you're not getting something out of it, it's okay to quit and stuff. It was a year-long mastermind and I was almost done at the very end. But I was like, I'm paying for all this money for one call, and she's not really keeping me accountable. She's not giving the content that said she was going to give us every single month and stuff. So I just was like, this is not working. And sometimes in your business, you just don't have things that work out, but you learn from them.
Well, that's a really humbling lesson. I mean, generally, when I hear the word mastermind, the masterminds that I've seen have been like shorter, like weekend or like a few days long. So that sounds like
So
a really long time for a mastermind.
yeah, it was a year-long mastermind, and like you would get a one-on-one call a month, and then you get like, I think there was like two group calls a month, and then you would also get like content, like modules that you could go through and stuff. But it was like they were giving me all the positivity because they would say, oh, you're doing all this stuff, but I wasn't seeing what I wanted to see and stuff like that. And I think that's the thing. And I think it's okay because if you're, I think sometimes we stick with things and we're like, well, I should stick for it because I committed for a year to doing it. But if it's not working, right? And it's not, it's every single aspect of our lives. It's not just business aspect. I had something where I was just continuing in it because I was like, well, like I feel like I'm supposed to do it. And it's like, well, you're not supposed to, just because everybody says you're supposed to do it, you're supposed to do it and stuff. So, and this wasn't even business related.
So tell us now, like, if we could shift into what you're currently shifting some things in your holistic nutrition business, right? Like what are you leaning towards offering?
Yeah, so I'm leaning towards offering so one-on-one consultations. I'll still be doing that. But for me, I'm shifting more as like I feel like I'm expanding more as because I'm in a new city and I've just grown. I've grown as a person, especially in the last like year and a half. And I was like, I love people with fibromyalgia, but it doesn't. It's not. It's just part of my story. I tell people, and so I'm like transitioning to just women who want to get healthy, who want to get back to feeling better. I have a backstory. I have food sensitivities and stuff like that. So helping women learn how to cook simple, healthy, delicious meals if you're a parent or not a parent, allergy friendly. So I'm offering like cooking classes, not just in person, but also I'm going to be doing online cooking classes. And that's a big thing for me is because I love to cook.
I like cooking too. What is like one of your favorite things to cook?
My favorite thing to cook, I don't know. I do roasted vegetables a lot. I love stir
Ooh,
fries. I love
yeah,
roast. I love sweet potatoes, broccoli.
yeah, the whole pan fry thing. I just started doing that a few months ago, and it's like life changing. I know I waited so long, but it's like wow,
I'm,
that's so easy.
yeah, I'm probably gonna do that tonight. Is like do that because I'm like I have food I need to just cut up and throw in a pan.
Yeah,
I don't want
yeah.
to
We
waste food.
we tried HelloFresh for a minute,
Yeah,
which whole other conversation, which we could. I mean, food is really important for entrepreneurs and people. I mean, we have to eat. Fuel is life. And I've seen many health practitioners who are just cramming as much carbohydrates, as much protein, as much fat as they can in their faces, in their bodies to fuel them up so that they can go through hours and hours of manual therapies and in-person therapy. So I'm sure that there's so much that you could get out of and being in front of health practitioners with that information as well. So you like this focus to cooking. So what is this like, what is a couple interactions that you've had recently with customers or with client prospects? What kinds of things have they said they're looking for?
I feel like a lot of people are looking for like just simple, easy, delicious meals. I think a lot of times we overcomplicate meals and we're like, well, I need to do all this. And I'm like, well, what's this simple? What can you do that's very simple? Roasted vegetables is very simple. Cut it up, throw it into the oven, and cook up some protein. I feel like protein's really important. Um, Add some healthy fat. I think a lot of times we overcomplicate things. And sometimes you don't need a recipe if you don't, if you're not like want to follow a recipe. Sometimes just free and do it because I think people are like, well, my health is the last thing I want to focus on. It should be like your number one thing because it's going to affect your sleep, it's going to affect your energy, it's going to affect your immune system and stuff. So taking it time out of the day or taking time like once a week and actually doing a lot of different batch cooking and using it in different ways is a great way to get on that journey.
And why can't they? What kinds of reasons are they giving you why they can't put health first?
I think it's a lot of what for me, I hear a lot of I'm too busy, I'm too tired. I have this going on. I have so much going on. And it's like, okay, well, do you value you as as a person? A lot of times I feel like if we don't take time to like even go for like a 20-minute walk is a good thing to do, even if it's once a day, because like we gotta just take a break from all the busyness. And I think a lot of times we think, oh, I'm just going to go out and get that fast food. But the fast food is filled with like fat, it's filled with salt, it's filled with sugar, it's filled with all this stuff that's going to make you super crabby, super nauseated, and super like tired and stuff. And that's why you're not feeling well enough to get to do the cooking and stuff.
Well, I
So
love that. I love that you reframe it for them with that question, do you value yourself? And um, offer them some space to learn about that. It's like that's a big mind, explosion right there for someone who doesn't value themselves, right? Like you're making them question, like, oh, do I value myself? Oh, well, what should I do instead? So that's a great entry to helping people change their minds about themselves and care about themselves. Well, thank you so much. I know we covered a lot of bases here today, but I think it all comes around really nicely that it's about valuing yourself, stepping up to the plate, and doing going forward with what you say you want to do. That's great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amanda.
thank you so much for having me, Laura.
You're welcome.